So the third part of that pasuk, the third part of the final pasuk in Kisava, Avarami Ovid Avi, the pasuk describes the delivery, the Yad Chazakah, which the Baal Hagadah assumes to mean Dever, the Zra Netuya, which the author of the Haggadah assumes to mean the Cherev, the sword, a war, whether it's a metaphoric war, the Makos being arranged to resemble warfare or an actual literal war, the war of the firstborn, the civil war, the insurrection which HaKadosh Baruch Hu incited by intervening in Egyptian politics. The third part of that pasuk is very interesting. The third part of the pasuk is over Mara Gadol. HaKadosh Baruch Hu delivered us with great Mara. What does Mara Gadol mean? It can mean many things. But the Haggadah interprets the word Mara Gadol to mean giluy shechinah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed himself. Very often the term, the root, Reish Aleph Hey, or Yud Reish Aleph Hey, Yera'eh, Vayera, Bahar Hashem Yera, Yera'eh Kol Zechorcha, refers to the experience of giluy shechinah, when man, as it were, sees God. Man can't see God, but interacts with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So when the Torah in Parshas Kisava writes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu redeemed the Jewish people of the Mara Gadol, the Haggadah assumes this to mean giluy shechinah. Now, this could seem very obvious, almost implicit. Of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu redeemed us. So, what else was there? Who else? What other being? Of course, it was HaKadosh Baruch Hu and His Shechinah who was redeeming us. But a deeper glance reveals something breathtaking, and really central and almost often neglected about the yetziat mitrzaim, and particularly that night. It wasn't just a night of justice. It wasn't just a night of theology, and it really wasn't just even a night of liberation. It was a night in which the love and the passion, the romance, this relationship between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and His people began to sprout. That's why so many people have this beautiful minhag to recite Shir HaShirim after the Seder has completed, because it's a night of magic. It's a night in which this long relationship between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and His people began. We've been marching through history, bearing our love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, suffering because of that commitment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because people can't take the message that we bear, so they shoot the messenger. And this was a history which was really born at Har HaMoriah, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised Abraham during the Bris Bein HaBisarim that the Jews would have a special history and a special historical calling, and that would cause them to descend into Galus and to suffer and then to be redeemed, whether it's the specific suffering in Egypt or the general structure of Jewish history. Tonight it all didn't begin, but it all began at a national level. This was the first moment of giluy shechinah. The first moment of giluy shechinah to a human collective audience. The first giluy shechinah at a personal level occurred to Avram Avinu in Parshas Vayera. Before Avram has a bris milah, he can't be makabel pnei shechinah. There are 3 mitzvos which a person without a milah can perform. A person who's an orel can perform every mitzvah in the Torah except for 3. Number 1, Karban Pesach. Number 2, Achilas Truma, if he's a Kohen. And number 3, he can't perform the mitzvah of Amidah Lefnei Hashem. He can't come into the Beis HaMikdash. So Avram can't rendezvous with HaKadosh Baruch Hu before he has a bris milah. Once he has a bris milah, then of course his halech lefanai ve'etamim. He can then be lefnei Hashem lefanai, which always means in front of the Shechinah, because he's a tamim, because he has a bris milah. So the first giluy shechinah occurs in Parshas Vayera. Vayera lav Hashem b'lenem amrei v'hu yashay pesach oil kechol mayom. Hashem appears to Avram after his bris milah. But tonight was the first Tesvav Nisan was the first giluy shechinah to a community, to a group of people. Now, where would we think the first giluy shechinah would occur? Beis HaMikdash, Mishkan, Har Sinai, Har Moriah. The last place in the world you would expect giluy shechinah, the first giluy shechinah to occur, is of course in Mitzrayim, because Mitzrayim is a cemetery. There are dead people at every door. It's also a cesspool of paganism. Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't even daven in Mitzrayim to alleviate it, to relieve the various makos. He had to leave Kitzesi Esa'ir, and yet HaKadosh Baruch Hu chooses Mitzrayim as the first site, the first moment, the first place to host the first giluy shechinah. Why? It's a very beautiful medrash. The Shimon in the medrash says, Gedola chibasan shel Yisrael. Hashem loves the Jews so deeply. Shenigla HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'makam avodas kochavim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu appeared to them in a place of idolatry, b'makam tinofes, and in a place of dirt and filth. Uvemakom tuma, and in a place of tuma kidei legolam. When you love someone, place is irrelevant. The place that that person is becomes your location, becomes your center of gravity. As the most adamant and daring demonstration of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love for us, to launch Jewish history, to begin Shir Hashirim, to begin that romance, Hashem descends into Egypt. The first time he descends into history and reveals himself to a collective audience in the place you'd least expect it to occur, simply because Am Yisrael is there. Gedol Chivas and Shal Yisrael. So on the night of Pesach, when we recite that final pasuk in Seil Lamad, Vayotzeinu Hashem Elokeinu Misham Biyad Chazakah Uvizra Nitriyah Uvemara Gadol, we're capturing something very powerful. This is a night not just of miracles and of liberation and of justice, but of giluy shechinah, the first giluy shechinah, in the place you'd least expect it to occur. Now, the fact that there's a giluy shechinah that night mandates two other elements. Number one, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will only appear to man if man performs mitzvahs. Religion is not just belief, value, concept, but it is practice, obedience, performing God's will, taking God's will and submitting the human will to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will, because we ultimately believe that that submission of human will is redemptive to the human condition. There cannot be a giluy shechinah on the night of Tesvav Nisan without mitzvahs. And it's strange because we eat matzah because we left Egypt too quickly in the morning of Tesvav Nisan. The bread couldn't bake, the bread couldn't rise. Why are we eating matzah the night before we leave? Why did they bring a korban pesach before they were actually redeemed? Mara, these mitzvahs weren't yet relevant. They had no symbolism attached to them. The answer is HaKadosh Baruch Hu said if tonight's going to be a night of giluy shechinah, it has to be a night of mitzvahs. There cannot be an encounter between God and man unless there are mitzvahs to mediate that encounter. Second of all, the blood. So many people question, why did Am Yisrael, why were we forced to place the blood on the doorpost? HaKadosh Baruch Hu couldn't be mavchin, ben dam ledam, ben tipa, mitzvahs, latipa, yehudis. HaKadosh Baruch Hu couldn't tell which house was Jewish, which house was Egyptian. He needed blood. The answer is the blood was not a sign for God. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu's shechinah would appear this evening, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu's shechinah would only appear through the initiation of a korban. Man calls God, man interacts with God through a korban, through kirva, coming close. Korban milashon kirva. As it was in Mikdash, as it was in Mishkan. So tonight the korban was brought, not just the mitzvah to eat matzah or maror, but to bring a korban. But every korban requires rikas adam, sprinkling of the blood on the mizbeach. The problem is, where's the mizbeach in mitzraim? There is no Mishkan, there is no Beis HaMikdash. The answer is, the Gemara Pesachim says, Tana Rabbi Yosef, Shlosha mizbechos hayusham. There were 3 mizbechos in Mitzrayim. Al Mashkov, the top post, the El Shtei Mezuzos, and both side posts. Sprinkling the blood was not a sign for God to hop over those homes to know that they're Jewish. It was actual Zrikas Hadam. There was no Mizbech, so the Jewish family, the Jewish home is the first Mizbech, the first altar. Sprinkle blood on the Mizbech, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's shechinah appears just like it did in Mishkan, as it was beckoned by a korban, just like it did in Mikdash. So tonight is the first moment of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's grand appearance into history, and it's the most unlikely and strange location, and that is a testament to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love for us. But if it's a night of giluy shechinah, if it's a night of Mara Gadol, it has to be a night of mitzvahs in general. Religious consciousness is not just belief and theory, but practice, mitzvahs. And it also has to be a night of korban and zrikas adam. That's why the korban pesach is eaten by a family. Sela beisava, sela bayis. Sometimes true freedom is to commit to a family, to be part of a family, to be part of something larger than yourself. An Eved doesn't have that freedom, doesn't have any yuchsin, doesn't have any family associations. Tonight we highlighted the freedom through our family, through our doorposts, which served as the first mizbeach in Jewish history.